And authenticity, it's knowing all parts of you, what your desires are in life, and really being authentic first to yourself.
The people that are coming to you asking for career advice, how often do you find that those conversations actually turn into a much broader conversation about their entire life? Susanna Kenyon-Muir, thank you for being part of this.
You're
I've been looking
welcome.
forward to
I am
this.
so excited to do this too. Who would have thought 20 years on?
I know, right? I know. I thought a good place to start would be for me to kind of talk about why I reached out to you. Because there are a few reasons. And I think we've spoken prior to this recording, and we've kind of had a chat and we've reconnected over lots of things. And I think the last comment we made was, we could talk for hours about this stuff, right? So, but the thing that grabbed my attention about you, it occurs to me that the world is full of coaches. You know, I saw a stat the other day, like coaching is one of the massive growth industries, right? And I find myself, you know, because I ask myself random questions all the time, why? You know, why is coaching all of a thing at the moment? Is that symptomatic of where we are as a species, as a collective, as a body of humanity? Like we need more and more help and more advice from elders and keepers of wisdom. So I think there's this beautiful, magical space opening up for people that have the right intention and have wisdom to offer. And in the content that you were posting, there was a question mark. I thought, okay, here's this young woman who has made this transition from, I was going to say the safety of the tech industry, but I won't say safety. I'll say the known entity of the tech industry to the somewhat unknown entity of coaching. So that in itself, I think, is worthy of unpacking, because I'm intrigued. Okay. So that's a risk. You know, what inspired that? What was going on in your life that led you to make that really meaningful decision to change course, you know, in a major way in your life? So that was the first thing that really kind of, you know, I was thinking about you and thinking, I wonder why she did that. And then the other thing that grabbed my attention was the fact that your content was infused with terminology and concepts and ideas that I was rolling around myself in terms of my life and where I wanted to go. And you were talking about limiting self-beliefs and emotional well-being and manifesting the life of your dreams, you know. And I'm thinking, this chick isn't just a regular coach here. She's tapped into some teachers, and, you know, along her path, she's accumulated her own wisdom. And so it was really those two things. It was the fact that you'd made this transition to coaching. It was also the fact that the content was different. And I guess I would underscore the difference by saying to you, we haven't spoken for 20 years, right? But there's a level of vulnerability and openness to you that I can perceive in your content. And I perceive that when I spoke to you a couple of weeks ago, and I think, oh my God, that's the magic. And this woman's got it. So that's the intro. And that's why I just wanted to kind of give you a background in terms of what led me to you.
Amazing. Okay. Well, I'll start from the beginning. I left the comfortable world of tech, and I remember my dad saying, "What are you doing? You have an amazing job and career. Why would you throw it all away?" And I remember saying to him, "What's the worst that can happen?" You know, and I said, "I want to do what I love." And I felt like tech had served a purpose in my career and in my life. But it wasn't energizing me anymore. And I remember there were kind of like pivotal moments in my life. And this probably ties into the first part of your question, but there are pivotal moments in my life where when I was 13, I was in Singapore. I went to boarding school. My parents moved to India. And I remember like looking outside my dormitory window and being so curious about like what made certain children the way they are, what made it easier for them to make friends, why were they popular? And for me, I was such an introverted child and I struggled to make friends and I was a bit quirky and awkward and and so I was just always curious about human dynamics and people. And that thread, that curiosity has carried throughout my life. And it's carried throughout my life in moments where I've struggled, you know, whether it's been in relationships or the relationship with my parents and I've just always wondered about people. And even when I was in Australia, when we were working together, I remember like in my mid 20s thinking, okay, I love tech, like it's great, I'm traveling, like, you know, it's presented a lot of opportunities. But I just always felt like there's got to be a bigger purpose to what I'm on this earth for and what I want
Mm.
to do. And I just didn't know what it was. And that curiosity was almost like I had planted the seed in my mind back then that at some point I want to set up my own business. I want to do my own thing and I want to do something where I'm giving back. I just didn't know what. And, you know, at the time I was I remember like why I thought this because a friend of mine, her husband was a neurosurgeon. And I remember thinking like for some people, it's so obvious what their purpose is. You know, for him, it's like he wants to save lives. So you go down a path to become a neurosurgeon. That's what you do. But I just hadn't found that passion. And it was when I moved to London 8 years ago that I started thinking, okay, I was in my early 30s and I wanted to, you know, I was like, I wanted to settle down. I wanted to buy a house. I wanted the relationship and the family and everything. And I was curious why, again, I kept getting into these patterns in my life. And I came across this lady. She did a talk on what success is to you and how success means different things to different people. And long story short, she became my first coach and I embarked on this journey of self-discovery. I always felt like I was very self-aware. But I realized then in working with her that I was more aware of my surroundings than of
Mm.
me. And whilst that might sound kind of like obvious, like to me, I realized that there were so many things about myself that I wasn't conscious of. And those unconscious patterns were the things that were holding me back
Mm.
and repeating itself in my life again and again. And to kind of touch on the point that you made at the beginning about there's so many coaches out there, everything that, like, I never had, even then, like, I never even thought that, oh, okay, my path is going to become a coach. But everything that I do in coaching now has all been a part of my own journey and my own experience, my own journey of self-discovery, my own journey of building a relationship with my family, rebuilding a relationship with them, you know, going through my mom getting diagnosed with cancer and then passing away, me trying to figure out also like health challenges, burnout, overwhelm, stress, challenges in the workplace, like all of that is like are all of the lessons that I've learned that I want to help people with.
Mm.
And I'll touch on the spiritual part in a second. But yeah, it was just going through that journey of self-discovery. And the more I got into it, I started studying it and I started studying NLP and coaching and at the time it was more of a passion. And but then as whether it's serendipity or whatnot, I started coaching people at Salesforce, which is where I worked for 4 years. And the more I did that, the more I realized I really love this. And then it ended up just becoming a culmination of things coming together. You know, me getting certified in coaching, working with people, turning 40, my mom passing away, questioning what I'm doing, you know, on this earth, and then going, do you know what?
Mm.
It's so clear to me that this is my purpose and what I want to do now. And so that just became why I do what I do. And so, yeah, that's my reason.
Mm. That's beautiful. It occurs to me that people are coming to you for career or life advice,
Hmm.
or coaching. How often do you find that the people that are coming to you asking for career advice, how often do you find that those conversations actually turn into a much broader conversation about their entire life? Because,
Mm,
you know, career is, to me, like that's on the back end of all these other things that have happened. And sometimes we're looking
mm,
for a promotion or advancement in a career that we don't even like, you know, but
mm,
because there's financial compensation attached to this, maybe some status, maybe to your point, we've been conditioned to believe that the thing to do is to get the next job, to get a bigger job so that I can have a bigger house and all these things. And when I start to unpack some of that stuff in my own head, I kind of think, oh wow, there's pain and there's trauma and there's conditioning informing all
mm.
of those desires. How often is it that you know you're saying, listen, you know, lady, man, can we start a little earlier than the conversation around how you get the next job?
Yeah, yeah, it's such a good point, an interesting point. And that's why I call, not that I'm like, the title matters, but I've been quite intentional about saying that I'm a holistic life and career coach because, most people come to me for career, but it's important to understand the other areas in your life that are important. And inevitably, there's always something else behind it. And you have to look at for me at least, the totality of a person. And, one of the first things that I do with clients is the very first session is to get clear on what three areas in your life are a priority outside of career. And it's important to know whether health, family, relationship, financial, personal growth, like it's important to know if which one of those are also important so that your career is in full alignment. There's no point in saying that you want to, change careers when you've got these, family commitments to, because you're just having a baby. So like, it's important to know these things. And for the clients that I work with to become aware of them too. But it's also important to know invariably also when you start working with people, things come out. The emotional like trauma or there's so many things. I mean, I'm working with a client now and exactly what you just said. It was promotion first. Then he's discovered that, he's got a huge passion for setting up his own investment business. But then there's some trauma that's come out, and that is he's realized he has this pattern of anger and negativity that he hasn't been able to identify. And then the penny dropped the other day, and it was so obvious. And now we're starting to unpick that. And unless you become aware of that trauma, it's very difficult to move forward because that pattern is stored in our bodies as emotions and, subconsciously, biologically. And so it's important to understand where that's come from to be able to release it so that you can move forward and it doesn't kind of come up again and again.
Mm,
So, yeah.
mm, mm. Um, that's. I want to go back if we can. That's a really interesting point. I think I'm fascinated by this idea of um, career coach, life coach, and the intersection of those two modalities. I
Mm,
guess are they different? Are they the same? But in terms of your story, I would love to go back and spend a little bit more time on your formative years. I mean, you mentioned that you grew up in Singapore, um, and that your parents moved to India, I think you said. And I think
hmm
that in preparing for this conversation, when we spoke, you mentioned that you'd gone to boarding school.
hmm
And I remember seeing this interview with Gabor Mate, who I'm sure you're familiar with. And
hmm
he was talking about trauma, which is obviously a big part of what he does. And he made this comment that really landed with me. And it landed with me because I'm the child of a single parent. And he said,
hmm
sometimes, we try and look for trauma in the shape of something explosive, a incident or you know, um, something that we would really associate with real
hmm
trauma, right? Um, and he made this comment, trauma can be the absence of a parent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And And I think about you and this young woman growing up in Singapore in a boarding school. And I wonder, to what extent has all of that shaped you? Do you have a perspective on,
Mm, oh my
those
God,
early beginnings for you?
100%.
And right, do you
Yeah,
want to comment on that?
100%. Yeah, sure. I mean, when I was just embarking on my coaching journey and trying to figure out how can I help people and what my story is, and I put a lot of thought into this. I remember thinking, well, who am I to help people? I don't have a traumatic story, and I've thought a lot about that. But actually, there are so many things that affect us as humans that we create impressions and imprints into our minds, and so these can all have ongoing repercussions. And to me, it is so clear now why certain things have panned out in my life the way that they have, and I'm happy to talk through them. But to answer your question, going to boarding school at 13, 100% not having my parents around has impacted me. Now, that's not to say everyone that goes to boarding school is going to have some sort of impact. Like, there are a multitude of things that have impacted, me. Um, to give a bit of context, my mom was German, my dad's British. We grew up in Singapore. Moved to Germany when I was 7, moved back to Singapore, and then my parents had this opportunity to go to India. And it was partially my choice. And, my parents, like, and this is part of like my discovery in going through coaching, that I realized this was such a pivotal moment because my parents were arguing all the time and had threatened divorce. And I remember my dad, I mean, this is quite a vulnerable thing to share, but my dad had said, they had an argument and he asked, which parent do I want to choose if they get divorced? And for a 13-year-old, that's such a huge weight to take on.
Hmm.
And I just remember thinking, I don't want to have to choose, so I'm subconsciously going to run away. And I think this has just imprinted this fear of potentially intimacy fear that has affected, me in my life further on. But also, I'm just going to be okay on my own and I'm going to protect myself. And as a result, going to boarding school where I was really shy and then became really social because I had to learn these new social skills, and I had to suddenly, break out of my shell. And I started to, become a lot more, confident and social and whatnot. But, um, I've lost my train of thought now, but as a result, sorry, what I was going to say is, as a result, I became fiercely independent, and that has served me in my career. But I've realized, like, probably in the last few years, that really affected me in my relationships because, from a polarity and dynamic in heterosexual, maybe even homosexual relationships, but I'm just going to talk about heterosexual. You want to have that polarity, but if you've got two masculine people, it makes it very difficult to have that
Big time.
synergy. And this has been such a big learning for me lately that I was just not aware of. So so I would say, like, going to boarding school has been great in so many ways, and I'm like so grateful to my parents. And I used to have a bit of this has also been a big growth for me. I used to have this blaming mentality, this victim mentality, and I blame my parents for like why I was the way I was. But this has been a big part of my healing as well. As my parents did the best that they could do with the resources and what they had available. My dad, always, his way of showing love was to give me a good education and to give me, you know, holidays and, accommodation and things like that. And I was just this child that just wanted to be loved. I just wanted the hugs and the presents, and I didn't want the money. And so,
Mm.
yeah,
Wow.
that's been my journey.
I'm smiling because there's so much of what you just said that is like a direct facsimile for me. Is because I was the same. Like I grew up in a single parent household, and my mum worked. She was a secretary and she sent me to a private school. And
Wow.
um, what she didn't know was that I would have preferred more of her than the private school. But she
Mm,
was just, like your dad, she was just thinking, well, I want to do the best for this kid. I'm on my own.
mm,
Um, and when you're that child, when you're Susanna at boarding school, when you're little Luke kind of running around a playground in Sydney, um, what I didn't know previously, but what I've come to learn now, only by kind of double clicking on my own story, and to your point, why do I do the things I do? Why do I end up attracting the people that I attract into my life?
mm,
Um, for 45 years, I was stomping around God's green earth thinking this is just happenstance, just the way it is.
mm,
This is the way I am. I would say that to myself. It's
mm.
just the way I am. Without ever taking a moment to say, can we
And then
investigate
you just
that?
get programmed to believe that, and then you just become that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 100%. And then even hearing you talk about forgiving your parents is like, oh my God, yes. Like that is such an important thing, is to get to that point where you appreciate the fact that this individual really loved me and was operating from a place of, the realm of their own awareness. It's what they knew
Mm,
at the time. You know, they might go on to learn other things, but at that point in time, they were making decisions based on a framework that they'd effectively inherited through their parents, their community conditioning. And so, why should I hang someone up, by the feet for that? Why can't I show that
mm,
person, particularly a parent, some compassion? And then once you start to let go of some of that stuff, I think what that does, in my opinion at least, it frees you up to direct some of that compassion back to you. And I think that's been a
mhm.
really important learning for me. Um, so yes to everything you've just said. Um, I really, really appreciate the fact that we have that in common. Um, there are so many places I want to go. You touched on the masculine, feminine. I'm way off track in terms of my questions, by the way. But you touched
That's
on,
okay. We're free flowing, and I want to make a comment. Can I just make a
yeah,
comment
yeah,
on this
please.
on forgiveness, because I actually just shared something on Instagram about this today. And forgiveness has been, it wasn't even that my parents did anything wrong, but I had to like forgive them, and also come full circle that my parents did the best that they could. And my mom grew up in post World War II. She lost her mom when she was 7. Had a abusive stepmother, like so many things. And so, I didn't have that awareness or compassion back then
Mm,
to see it from their standpoint. And my mom did everything to try to give me what she, the best life that she could. And, we had a frictional relationship, but I'm so glad that I could come full circle, like when I was in London, and then like before she passed, when she was diagnosed, to really say all of the things and forgive her, and make peace. And there are often the cases where I work with clients and they are so angry at their mother, or a parent or someone in their life, or at themselves, and they hold on to that grudge, and they're just, there's so many ramifications to doing that. Like, not only are you holding yourself back, but energetically and emotionally, your body is almost like eating itself up from the inside. And that can cause all sorts of disease. And, people are literally, I mean, I've just come back from, Dr. Joe Dispenza, and had an amazing retreat, but people are causing disease from these lower vibration emotions and this anger. And so that's why forgiveness is so important, because you're going to heal yourself and be able to unlock yourself so that you can move forward. So I just
mm.
wanted to mention that as well.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did. There was in something you said a little earlier, you mentioned the fact that um, the attitude you had as a young woman was, it's okay, I can do this on my own. I don't need
Mm,
anyone. You know, I've got this. And boy, when you said that, it was like, oh, that landed. It was like, that was me. That was me. It's been me. Like, I don't need anyone.
mm,
Um, and it's not until you actually sort of reach in and start to like see what's in the engine and move parts around that you understand that, you know what, that's, to your point, that's maybe that gets you through a career, and people are drawn to you because, one of those adaptive behaviors that you've developed is confidence or humor. Like these are things that I brought into my kit bag, like confidence,
mm,
humor, um, quick-wittedness. These were my party tricks,
mm,
um, that I developed, that people probably perceived in me and thought, oh, that's interesting about that guy. But what they didn't know was that these were all things that I kind of rustled up, um,
mm,
to help me navigate a very uncertain path. And one of the realizations later in life is that I've landed upon is that they're not so, those adaptive behaviors, and I'm okay on my own. They're not so good for relationships.
mm-hmm.
Um, Pretty difficult to work
Yeah.
through, right?
Yeah.
Particularly, I think, and what triggered me, Susanna, on this point was you mentioned the word, or you mentioned the masculine feminine dynamic,
Mm-hmm.
and I think oftentimes when we do grow up in circumstances that are less than ideal, where there is trauma, where there is a lack of love and being seen, and being acknowledged. I've lost my thought, my train of thought now. Um, what was I saying? Masculine, feminine. We, particularly for a woman, I think if you're charting your own course, you're oftentimes in your masculine.
Mm,
Um, and it's very hard in terms of relationship. If you're calling in a man or a woman, um, but let's to your earlier point, let's talk about heterosexual relationships. And a man arrives, and you're in your masculine, and
mm-hmm.
you're the hard charging sales rep that's booking 10 meetings a
Mm,
week and smashing their number, or you're this high flying coach that people are crawling over each other to get to because there's such value in what you've got to offer. It's hard for a man to show up in front of that woman and say, well, how do I lead you? How do I
mm,
play the traditional masculine role in a situation
yeah.
where there's so much masculine energy coming from you? I don't even know where to start. Um,
Mm,
so I've observed that a lot in our industry, or maybe your old industry, and
mm.
maybe it's still the industry for me. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts or comments about that?
Yes, 100%. I think it's become a bit of an epidemic because I think so many women have, and this has, been my journey, right? Like I became so hyper independent. I felt like I had to forge my own path. I had to take care of myself. And, I moved to Australia when I was 18. I went to uni and I was on my own and I had to make my own friends. I had to figure out university. I had to, become financially independent. And so it just became an innate behavior that I had to learn how to be in my masculine.
Mm,
And I remember like my dad almost, because I have a younger brother, but I think when growing up, he almost wanted me to be the boy. And, took me to golf, gave me golf lessons, and was like, Susanna, you have to, do this. And he would teach me Excel and he would do probably the things he loved doing, but they weren't the things I loved to do. And so I became a little bit of a boy. And then when I got into boarding school, sorry, when I got to Australia, when I started working, I didn't even know this, by the way, but I had this guard around me and I had this almost like these conflicting sort of dynamics. I had this, I don't need anyone's help. I know everything. I was a bit like Miss Righteous. But at the same time, I was yearning for love. I was yearning for affection. And so I would get
Mm.
into these almost like anxious avoidant, dynamics where I'd latch onto men and then, probably scare them away. Or I'd be like the good ones that, emotionally available. I would not know how to be in that dynamic. And I'd be like, I don't need this, push them away. And so this pattern kind of ensued throughout my life. And I see it so often, in the workplace and, even just in a workplace environment, I realized that it's funny because people tell me now I'm very calm. It's one of the things that like they will always say to me, "You're so calm." But if you had asked me back then, and I don't know what your memory is of me, but I just remember being told and feeling I was more in my masculine. I was aggressive. I was, I used to be in sales. I would do whatever, like it was like a horse with blinkers. And, I used to burn the candle on both ends. I'd go out partying. I'd go to the gym early and like I would just, it was relentless. And I just didn't know any better, to be honest. I just did what I thought I needed to do to survive and thrive. But now my version of thriving is balance. It's taking care of my body. Like I don't want to be, for example, running a coaching business where I am, hustling and I've got, my calendar is booked from, 8 to 5 p.m. every day. Like I create spaciousness. I'm like designing a life that feels nourishing, fulfilling, and, is by choice, is by design, but also I am building my wealth and I'm doing it in a way that is in alignment with me. And that is how I try to help people as well. But just to kind of like circle back on the masculine feminine, like I was seeing that some of my masculine traits were causing conflict, even, like in working relationships with colleagues, with my managers, because I was so assertive and so in my, righteous mind that I thought I knew best. And, and it was like, I didn't need any help and it was my way or the highway. And it was affecting my ability to receive, you know, like if we define masculine, feminine, just so that we're sort of clear and like not everyone, knows what it is, but masculine is doing, it's action oriented, it's being organized, it's assertive, having a plan. It's like more action oriented kind of energy. Feminine is being, it's receiving, it's allowing, it's, being in that energy of communicating and listening to your intuition. And I think sometimes when we are in a corporate environment, we think it's all about doing. But
Mm.
actually, what I have learned is, and also from a spiritual and energetic standpoint, if you get into like, quantum physics and the universe and the law of energy, sometimes when you slow down and you allow things to come to you, there is magic in allowing things, the unexpected. And there is magic in just slowing down, right? And letting people help you. And I used to struggle with that because I was like, I don't need anyone's help. But even if I know the answer sometimes to something, I'll let someone give me the answer, and I'll let someone help me because people like to help,
Mm.
and so I've had to learn these behaviors and I've had to, especially in relationships, just surrender and just not be the woman that like has it all together because that hasn't really gotten me very far, in terms of relationships and there's beauty in doing life together and allowing that dynamic to play out. So I know I kind of touched on a few points, but yeah.
No, that's great. I love that. I love that. Um, how did you find your way into tech? I don't think I've ever asked you that.
Kind of fell into it, but growing up in Singapore, I was always a bit of a geeky gadget girl. Like I liked technology. And when I was in Australia, I did a business degree and I found this ad that was like a recruitment company that basically specialized in placing people into tech sales roles, but that's not what the ad said. But it was a really cool process where you would go through an assessment day. You would pass the assessment day. You had to do all sorts of like tests and presentations, and they would give you like, yeah, presentations you had to pitch to people. And then if you got accepted, they would then pitch you to clients. And Citrix was one of those clients. And that's how I got
Oh, wow.
into tech. And at the time, like I was kind of, I had, let's say, obsessive tendencies where I really wanted to work for Google or like one of the big tech companies. And, I would really read all of the books, and I got quite far in the interview process with Google, but back then I wasn't Australian, so I didn't have sponsorships, so they couldn't sponsor me. But anyway, everything happens for a reason. Then I got the job with Citrix. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
rest is
Yeah.
history.
Mm.
That was my
Yeah. I
first
think
job.
really out of university.
Yeah, my first corporate job. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things that we have in common is that we both share a love of storytelling. And I think it's one of those sales or tech sales. It's one of those industries that really lends itself. I mean, everyone's a salesperson, right? Everyone's trying to influence. I try to influence my children to brush their teeth. Um, so I think oftentimes, the tech industry, and particularly tech sales, I often refer to myself as a refugee. I just sort of found my way, into that industry based on two things. One was I had an appreciation that I could earn a lot of money, and the second thing was that I figured out that it was an industry and an exchange where storytelling played a really important role. And I could spin a story, I could tell a yarn, and so it's been a 20-year journey for both of us, right? Maybe a few more years for me because I'm a little older than you. But I do look back on that period, and it's mostly been positive. It's mostly been rewarding and gratifying, and I've learned so many lessons. When you reflect upon your career in tech, what are the things that you've taken with you into coaching, do you think, that you learned or acquired in that period?
So many things. I mean, so many things from like sales. I started in sales. I have to sell, to your point, I have to sell my services now. I do discovery calls, and a lot of what I learned when I was in sales, like the foundational skills, I use now. I Customer success, which is where I spent the last half of my career, is very similar to coaching. Customer success is helping companies be successful in using technology, but behind those companies are people. And I think where I did really well was build and understand relationships with key stakeholders and really understanding them and their motivators. And so that skill is very similar to coaching. I'm helping individuals be successful in their life and helping them define what success is and using various coaching techniques to get them there. But so that's very similar. A lot of like coaching is coaching, like that's one part, but like I also have a business that I have to create and run. And a lot of the skills that I learned in tech were business. I did sales, customer success, business development, marketing. And I mean, the only thing that I really had to learn is social media. But a lot of it was like on the job learning, but there's so many transferable skills that maybe don't look so obvious on the outside, but are actually, when you get into the deep drill down, like are, transferable skills as well. I mean, even basic things like actually a lot of tech platforms I use. There's so much technology behind my business that I need to use. Like, I think the fact that I've been wired into adopting and using technology for so long has made it easy for me to transition into using tech. I use all sorts of things from Google Suite, obviously Zoom, like this is where I started, um, selling GoToMeeting, and I have LinkedIn automation, like email automation. I mean, all of this, just so many things that I use that maybe you don't see on the outside, but and I see other people that don't have a tech background, and there's real resistance around using tech, and I've got to use this, and it feels like this real sort of pain. But so I would say that's also been a huge benefit.
Hmm. Hmm. You use one of my favorite words then. Not that I'm a masochist, but you use the word pain. It's one of my favorite words.
I was going to follow it up with, some more profane language. But I thought I'll keep it PC.
I'm sure you've heard this quote before. Carl Jung said there's no coming to consciousness without pain. And someone else said this, and maybe you'll guess who said this. Here's another quote. We're all faced with great opportunities brilliantly disguised as impossible solutions. As a coach, how do you interpret that comment? And for bonus points, do you know who said that?
I don't. Can you say it again?
I'll read it again. We are all faced with great opportunities brilliantly disguised as impossible solutions.
No, I don't know who that
It's
is.
Joe Dispenza.
No way.
Yeah.
I would have thought, of all people, I would have known.
Yeah.
I mean,
He
apart
also
from him.
said pain is the gift that no one wants. The reason I guess I'm sort of double clicking on pain is that if I think about transformations, transitions, moving from tech to coaching, starting a podcast, setting out on some brand new endeavor that is uncertain, that is part of our hero's journey. My experience has always been that there's been some sort of rupture that's precipitated that. The biggest, most impactful transformations are normally precipitated by some life explosion. Yeah. Was when you reflect upon your transition from tech to coaching, was that a slow burn in terms of you realizing that was the path that you wanted to embark on, or was it a lightning bolt, got hit in the back of the head by a 4x2, and I've got to do this?
Yeah, so I'll firstly answer the question. Yes, I do think that trauma or some significant event in someone's life will be the proponent towards change. Now, they say that people make a decision either based on fear or pleasure, but fear tends to drive people forward first. And so, definitely from a coaching perspective, if you can understand where that pain has come from and what the driver for change is, like, that's always going to be the thing that's going to propel someone forward. That's not to say that people won't change without, and but so for me, yes, there have been pivotal moments. I would say it was a slow burn, but that it then was a quick decision. There were like those pivotal moments. So I would say for me, it was like heartbreak in 2021. And that's when I first found Dr. Joe Dispenza's, one of his books, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And it was coming, we were coming out of COVID, and I, went to the Canary Islands for a few months. I read this book. I just went deep into it. And I started realizing that these patterns, I had already done, some work with coaching, but I realized that the patterns I had from a anxiety kind of perspective in relationships, like I kept getting into like this anxious attachment style, and I wasn't quite consciously aware of why. So I got deep into that, and I remember meeting my ex a few years, like recently, and I said to him, I was so thankful for our relationship because I said everything that I have learned, like the reason why I got into coaching is because of all the sort of, not the pain, but like it wasn't that anything that he did, but it was a lot of my lessons, right? Like the growth that I had to go through, the learning where this fear of rejection and fear of, these anxious attachment styles came from. So that I think was a key thing. And then, it was my mom getting sick, losing my mom. And then I was just telling the story to a client this morning. I realized coming to the end of my tenure in tech that I was feeling drained in what I did. I left Salesforce to join another company. I wanted to give tech one more go. I wasn't quite ready to do my own thing. And I remember just feeling like drained in meetings and just feeling like this isn't fulfilling anymore. And I felt like Susanna minus 2.0 was showing up in the meetings. And,
Mm,
I remember thinking that at the time, like I didn't like the person I was becoming and I was not fun. I was like drained. I hated what I did. And I didn't hate it, but I just didn't love it. And because I had been doing so much work already on getting clear on my purpose, like, and I was already, this is like the slow burn because I was doing coaching in the background. I was doing the qualifications. I was starting to get clients. I was mentoring people. I already was, and when my mom was sick, I had so much time in between hospital visits that I was already creating social media content and starting my business on paper. So I was just on that path. And I had this innate knowing in my heart that this is what I wanted to do. I just knew it, but I couldn't, it wasn't the right time to take the plunge because my mom was sick and I was taking care of her. But as soon as she passed, I took some time off to heal and I came back and I pulled the pin. It was like I did a 180 on my life, which, which felt like the right thing at the time. And I'm obviously grateful because that's where I'm at. I would have maybe, slowed down in some other respects, because I changed not only my career, but where I lived, traveling, new relationship. And so that was a lot for my body to handle. But yeah, I'm so grateful for how it's all, in a way worked out because, yeah, I love what I do now.
yeah. You mentioned heartbreak. I think there is, I hear that a lot in terms of people I talk to that have gone through some sort of transformative process. There's normally some grief there that seems to kind of
Yeah.
light the fuse, and then it might be a short fuse, it might be a long fuse, but there's typically a beginning there, and it sounds like that fuse was lit for you in 2021 when you
Mm.
um, when you finished up that relationship. Um, I want to touch upon your relationship with your mum a little bit, if I can.
Sure.
When she was sick, and it sounds like her sickness sort of coincided with um, you making this determination to kind of figure out who you are and why you believe the things that you believe and why you do the things that you do and why you say the things you say. Were you able to um, lead her in terms of repairing that relationship? Like, as she's sick, the two of you are spending more time together. Um, were you able to, the new skills, the new emotional skills, and the new emotional muscles that you developed, and the self-awareness that you developed, when you applied that to the relationship that you had, um, I think have, I think you'll always have a relationship
Hmm.
with the people that we love. Um, were you able to flex those muscles with your mother as she was um, transitioning?
Oh, 100%. And I always say that if I hadn't already embarked on a journey of work, coaching and doing the inner work and the healing and, what I mean by that is because it's such a broad term, coaching, healing, like, you know, reframing being a victim to, understanding, my parents' situations, seeing things from a place of love and compassion, not blaming them, not fear or anger, working on my mental well-being so I wasn't burning out and taking care of myself, like focusing on self-love, like all of those things helped me to manage the process of her being diagnosed to passing away. And also just being comfortable with her passing, because I do believe we are spiritual beings and our lives, our souls continue. So there was a comfort in this is not the end and death, and to be comfortable with death. Like, I think there's a stigma that death is such a horrible thing, but it's just a passing into the next realm. So, but to answer your question, yeah, I wanted to give back to my mom in the way that she'd given to me in my life, and I wanted to make amends. So, that was kind of how I wanted to show love, which was like showing up. It was being more or less, I became her primary caretaker. And I drove back and forth from hospital to London. And, sometimes that was a few times a week, and it was 1 to 2 hours each time, each way. I wrote her letters, forgiveness letters. I wrote her the things I wanted to say. I read them to her. I, got her favorite things, like little things she used to love, like these brownies and bread from this bakery in London that you couldn't get where she was. And so that was my way of making amends. And I wanted to do and say all of the things before she passed because I didn't want to regret it.
Mm.
So,
yeah, that's beautiful. Do you think, you mentioned that she grew up in a very traumatic time and lost her mum when she was 7. Do you think towards the end she'd found a way of holding those experiences more lightly?
The thing is, like, she never really talked about it. My mom was not very open. And, like, the other thing is, we found out towards the end of her life that she also had Alzheimer's. So she wasn't really so consciously aware, although they say subconsciously they're still there. So I don't even know if she didn't really talk about her relationship back, her childhood. But I can see now, maybe because I'm so aware now and intuitive, and like that had to have had a huge impact on her. And I think my mom, in a way, gave up on life towards the end. It just became so hard, and she had a great life, but a difficult life, and in some ways, and I think there might have been an element of depression, and so yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I might have mentioned this to you when we were talking about the idea of doing this podcast a few weeks ago. I was at a retreat a few months ago, and one of the facilitators made a comment that, again, really landed. I grabbed my journal and I wrote it down because I'd never thought about it before. He said, trauma renders your intuition null and void. It takes away from your gut instinct, your ability to kind of intuit. And, reflecting upon that, at points in my life where I have been, I guess, emotionally dysregulated, thinking back on those times and the decisions I was making and the people that I had in my life, I think, wow, my intuition, it was like the radar. It's like looking at a compass and, the needle isn't pointing north anymore. It's just kind of swirling around. How reliable has your intuition been up to and including your career as a coach?
It's so interesting because um, I feel like I'm so much more intuitive now, and I listen to my body and I listen to, is it a hell yes or a hell no? And there's an element of, I don't know if you're familiar with human design, but in human design, we all have different energy centers and different energy types. And depending on that, you make decisions from a different place. Now, I'm a generator and a sacral authority, which basically means I should listen to my gut and it should be a hell yes or a hell no. But there are some energy types, I think it's manifesting generator, where they should wait to make that decision. So what I'm saying is, and a reflector, reflects on other people. So you don't always, if you believe in human design, which incorporates astrology and um, uh, numerology, Kabbalah, and different, why can't I think of what the other one is? Different kind of teachings, quantum physics as well. You know, based on that, some people are intuitive and some people are not. Now, to answer the question from my perspective, I've become a lot more intuitive and listen to that intuition. And this is where I think the beauty of slowing down is so important because, and slowing down is being more in your feminine. It's meditating, it's slowing down and allowing your body and your intuition to listen to it. Because so often, and this was my experience working in corporate, you go, 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 and you're not listening to the signs. You're not seeing the signs. You're just, and my mom used to say this to me all the time. She was like, Susanna, you need to slow down. And I was like, I don't need to slow down. I'm cool. Until a year
Mm.
ago, I burned out. My body gave in and I was just exhausted and I was so tired. And, there were even other instances I can see where I had a voice in my head, even in my last relationship. And there was nothing wrong with him, but I just had this voice that just kept playing in my mind. And I didn't listen to it. And I look back on that now and I almost like have to, with compassion, give myself that permission to listen to my intuition and to listen, you always know best. And I think giving yourself the time and space in your day to listen to your body, to your mind is so powerful. And sometimes when I'm a bit stuck with something, I mean, I meditate almost every day now, and I never used to. And it has been so powerful for me to shift my energy to manifest, but also to ask myself questions like, what do I want? And, let the answer come to you. So
Mm.
yeah, that's also
Yeah,
been
that's
helpful.
that's uh, that's a statement that's come from wisdom. Yeah, it takes a while to
Yeah.
figure that out. You got to slow down to speed up. I agree.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned that you had a conversation with um, a woman who was a coach, and that was
Hmm.
one of the things that sort of got you thinking about this. Maybe um, aligned with this pathway that was emerging for you. What role have mentors played for you over the course of your career and now as a coach? And how important is continuous learning for
Yeah.
anyone, but particularly a coach?
I think continuous learning is 100% important for anyone in any field, and especially as a coach. I'm not sure if it's really there's a delineation. I would almost argue in any field, you have to continuously learn. You have to continuously, upgrade your experience, your knowledge. Like the world is constantly changing. And so you need to change and evolve too. I mean, I think you could
Mm.
ask any company that as well. You have to learn and change with the times, otherwise you'll get left behind. I would say from a coaching perspective, you have to do a lot of learning within and also learning, new skills. I'm constantly learning things about myself. I'm learning it in relationship. I'm learning it in coaching. I'm learning it in my business. I'm learning it in traveling with friends. So 100%, you know, I mean, right now I'm working with a business coach. Last year I worked with a money mindset coach. The year before I was working with, a business and strategy kind of more holistic coach for 12 months. I work with a relationship coach. I mean, I'm honestly like super into coaching, and I believe in the power of having help. Ironically more than I did before. And and but growing up or in my early career, I had like, I would say, accidental mentors. And I remember there was someone from Citrix, Dwayne, he was an amazing mentor to me. And I don't know if you know him.
I remember
And,
Dwayne. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and had a real impact on my career and on my life in many ways. And so I do think it's important to have mentors and coaches. Mentor, the difference is they can overlap, but a mentor is in a position that you want to grow into and, can obviously give advice, whereas a coach is more there to support you a coach actually by definition shouldn't give advice, but is maybe not in the field that you are in.
Mm.
So yeah, but I think more people should get help, whether it's for coaches or mentors, and get clear in where you want help from. I mean, I always give the analogy, it's like a sports, an athlete. All athletes have coaches, right? Because they want to be better in their chosen sport. So it's the same in life. Like if you want to be better in business, get a business coach. If you want to be better in your health, you get a trainer or a nutritionist or a naturopath. If you want to be better in figure out life, get a life coach. Or if it's career. So that's what I would say. And yeah, I say it from a place of like, I practice what I preach. And,
Mm, mm,
yeah.
What do you look for in a coach? As a coach, what are the constituents or the characteristics of a coach that appeals to you?
Mm. Well, firstly, chemistry and like, do you get along with that person? Is there,
Mm,
relatability? Do you feel like that person understands you and understands your past, or understands your situation? Sorry, not necessarily your past, because ultimately you need to trust that person and build a relationship with them, and you have to be able to be authentic and real and vulnerable. Then someone that's had results. You're not going to get a personal trainer that's overweight and when you want to lose
yeah.
weight. In the same way, like you want to get a career coach that's had a successful career and also a successful life and had results, either in their own life or with clients. And the business coach that I just hired, he's like doing amazing in his business. He's also become a friend. And so I trust him, and that's why I've hired him. So
Mm,
yeah, I think those qualities are important.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, when we were talking about this conversation, I think it was my suggestion that we divide this conversation into 4 chapters. The early years,
Yeah.
um, your experience in the tech industry, coaching, chapter 3, coaching. Um, what does chapter 4 look like for you? I think you used a word when we spoke last. You used the word blossoming, which I really liked. And when you think of the word blossoming and where you are today and perhaps your vision for the future for your life and your business and your health and your relationships, and what does the blossoming look like for Susanna?
I love this question because it's so integral to what I do in my own life and what I help people with. I'm very much about life by design, and we are the creators of our lives. And for me, the blossoming is into being and becoming the woman where, I am building a family and a thriving business, but a business that feels like in alignment and congruent and like something that I love. It's um, one of the things I really love doing is bringing people together and running retreats, essentially, because I love going to retreats. And, I've started running retreats, and there's something magnetic about bringing people together and having a real mind, body, and soul experience and a transformational experience where you leave a different person. And I love curating those things together because it's basically an amalgamation of what I do in my own life. It's travel, it's wellness, it's spirituality, and it's coaching, right? So that's my dream, and I would love to set up like create a retreat center and a retreat space. I also love design. You know, I studied interior design in COVID, so I want to build my own home. I want to nest. Yes, I'm just gonna put that out there. I'd love to like have family and share that with someone. And to me, like I remember in one of my coaching workshops years ago, when I did my NLP training, and we went through this kind of timeline exercise, and it went to the end of what my mission is, and I was holding this ball, and this ball is like this yin and yang, and it's this like balance between career and like life and family, you know, the yin and the yang almost. And that is what I want
Mm.
to create. I want to create balance. I want to create connection and community, and basically create a life that is filled with all of my desires and the things that I want to do that also have impact to other people. So yeah, very different to, I guess, where I was 20 years ago.
Yeah. 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 That's beautiful. Yeah. Um, One of the things that drew me towards you is, and I don't know whether you're aware of this or not, but your vulnerability, and there's an openness to you that I don't see as often, particularly in people from the industry from which I've come and that you know so well, right? It's depending on the company you work for, you know, culturally, it's typically hard charging, aggressive, um, um, and there isn't a lot of room for um, vulnerability. And to some degree, and perhaps this is somewhat controversial, I think there's also uh, not a lot of room. I mean, if all of this is subject to, you know, who's running the company, the leadership team, their values. But I also, I always, I've got a little suspicion that I think if companies were to embrace the power of vulnerability and authenticity,
Hmm.
it would actually impact shareholder value rather than just you know, the individuals concerned. Um,
Mm.
and I think for those companies, I saw something. It was a clip from Brené Brown, and she was basically saying the next generation of companies that are going to really cut through and be successful, from a human relations point of view, kindness and empathy are going to be um, more important than they've ever been within company culture.
Mm.
Do you see the beginnings of that, or is that just a pipe dream at this point?
I do see the beginnings of that. And I think, I mean, I can only share it from what I see with clients that I work with. And also, I think there is more, you know, going back to feminine, masculine energy, I think more leaders are stepping into feminine energy, which is empathy, which is kindness, what you just mentioned, and it is vulnerability. And, you know, one of the things that I also work with clients on is stepping into their next level of leadership. And a lot of this is in the case of men. And, you know, it's stepping into this more balanced, you know, empathetic, vulnerable leader. And, you know, whenever I do this exercise around, you know, who are their role models and what kind of leader do they want to be, like empathy and, you know, being someone that people like and that people want to approach, and having an open door policy and not being that authoritative or not authoritative, that sort of autocratic and bulldozer kind of manager. Like people don't want to be that person, and no one wants to work with that person. So I think there is a shift in consciousness in towards being a more conscious, empathetic, and open leader. Absolutely. Whether there's enough being done, I think there's more and more companies are opening up to mindfulness, and consciousness. But I think there is still a gray area. There's still a lot of work to be done.
Hmm.
And there's still, I think, this maybe, contrast or conflict in needing to, shareholder value, revenue, profits, targets, all of that being the driving force. And when you are constantly in that go, go, go energy, it's very hard to suddenly go, well, let me try and change my ways, because you've built this innate pattern in your body. You're so used to it. So unless something breaks, and going back to the pain and the trauma, unless that you have that, it's very difficult for someone to be like, if it's not broken, why fix it?
Hmm.
So I think unless you have these key incidents within, and it all starts from the top, right? If the CEO and the leaders are not changing, then it's very difficult for the rest of the organization to change. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I remember going
that's
to,
my thoughts.
it was a Citrix kickoff actually. I can't remember his surname, but he was the CEO at the time, Mark. Maybe you've got the surname.
Templeton,
Yeah, yeah.
Templeton. Yeah,
And I remember him, it was the first Citrix kickoff that I'd been to, and he had lost a son in a car accident.
I remember that. Yeah,
Remember that? Yeah. And so straight away, my spidey sense was when he got on stage, um, he'd made reference to losing his son, and he made this comment, and I don't know how long ago that was, Susanna, it was a long time ago, but he
yeah,
said, the hardest thing in the world is to be yourself. And I looked around because, other people in the amphitheater sitting next to me are thinking, did you just catch this? Like, this is the CEO of a
yeah.
company, a software company, talking about authenticity and how important it is to be yourself and how freaking difficult that is. And everyone's on their phones, just, chewing gum or drinking. And I'm thinking that is a
Mm,
really important thing for a leader to say.
mm,
And I'm just interested on your thoughts in terms of the importance of authenticity for an individual contributor, for a manager, for anyone
yeah.
that is living life. What role do you think
Mm.
authenticity plays for all of us?
Someone I spoke to today who works in tech, I had a connection call and he asked me, why is authenticity important? So we've just had this conversation. Um, I'll answer it first with giving a bit of context. When I was working in tech, I was always really fascinated by leadership, good and bad. I've experienced the good, the bad, and everything in between. And I always remember like looking on stage to like the great leaders and the ones that were vulnerable and empathetic and shared something from the heart. I always thought, you're a good, like that. I was always drawn to that.
Hmm.
And I always thought that's the way to lead. That is leadership to me. And so, and that to me is coming from a place of being authentic and sharing what's vulnerable to them. Like, when Mark shared that, like, I'm sure that built so much connection and respect and trust, right? Because they're like, if you can share something so vulnerable about yourself, then I feel like I can trust and maybe even relate to. Um, and authenticity is, it's knowing all parts of you. It's being curious about who you are. It's being curious about what your desires are in life, your passions, what you're good at, and really being authentic first to yourself, and then being able to step into that in the world with confidence and articulate that to people so that, you're not putting on a facade. You're not pretending to be someone. Or so often I speak to people and they've fallen into a career. Like this morning, I spoke to a lady and she said, I'm a finance graduate because my parents, told me I should, and I hate it. And she wants to be in fashion. And it's so often that these stories kind of start from a place of people fell into a career because their parents told them to, or they were peer pressured, or they thought they had to for financial reasons, but that's not authentic to them. And then the work starts in their career in their mid 30s or 40s, where then they think, well, what do I really want to do? What's aligned and authentic to me? And that is a process of peeling back the layers of the onion of who you really are. And the more you become clear with that, the more aligned you will feel, the more you can start to pave a way and a path forward and make a decision towards a career that you want. And that is what I'm really passionate about, because, we've got this life on earth, and make the most of it, do what you love. And the other byproduct I was just going to share with being authentic is I really think when you become so clear in who you are and you feel in alignment, it builds a confidence. You build this confidence within yourself for me, I realized I suddenly became really confident to speak on stage and publicly. And I never used to have that. I remember one of my first public stage appearances at Citrix when I was 27 was an absolute disaster. I read from the script. I hadn't internalized the work. I was not confident. I didn't really know who I was either. And I remember putting on this like corporate hat, and I wasn't being myself. And I remember Dwayne actually saying to me, why are you acting like a robot? Like, where's bubbly Susanna? And that was such a pivotal moment. I remember this now. And I was like, and I started to just embrace who I am and just speak from that place. And people can relate to that. And that's why I think authenticity is so important, because people want to relate to you. They want to know the real you, not the
Mm,
facade.
mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think there's you mentioned a confidence when you're authentic. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think there's there's this the way I describe it is when I'm at my best authentically, um, I'm not looking for validation.
Mm,
One of the indicators for me is if I can feel myself looking to get kudos or get someone's attention, I'm kind of thinking, okay, there's what's going on here. But I think when I'm operating from this place of real authenticity, it imbues me with this unshakable, I couldn't give a shit what someone thinks about me, says about me, because I know that
mm,
I'm completely committed to my path. And when I am, the judgment drops, and compassion
mm,
steps in. So I think there's a huge um I place so much importance on authenticity, and because as Mark said, it's at times it can be the hardest thing in the world, to be
mm.
yourself, right? So um to that point, I wanted to ask you, just sort of going back, and we're kind of on the path into the end of the conversation, but at the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned your childhood and um, being in the playground and being fascinated with why some kids were popular and perhaps others weren't. Having had, I don't know, 35 years to think about that question, have you got any thoughts on what makes someone more popular or appealing than another?
I would say, like, full circle to what you just said, it's being yourself,
Yeah, yeah,
and it's being so confident in that, and just like not caring about what other people think. And, but that's a journey of getting to know who you are.
yeah.
And I definitely, at that age, I mean, I didn't know who I was. And, um, there's also this like dynamic of attracting versus chasing energy. And I think, when I was 13, it was like, I just, I wanted to be liked. I wanted to be accepted. And this is something that I struggle with throughout my life, because you know, the sense of belonging, because I lived in so many countries. I didn't
Mm,
really know where I belonged from a country perspective. Um, and I was trying to like figure out, how did I fit in? and how did I fit into these different cultures, and moving from Asia as a white Western girl to Australia, and I wasn't Australian, and I didn't go to school in Australia, so it was like I was a bit of an anomaly. And then I moved back to Asia, and then I moved to London, and everyone's like, "Oh, you're moving back," but I wasn't British. I don't sound British. I sound American. It's like all of these dynamics. So I just had to go on this journey of like, who am I? And just kind of full circle, well, this is how I am. I am different, and embrace it. And I think the more you own it and embrace who you are, the more people respect you as well.
Mm.
There's this like correlation between knowing who you are, respect, confidence, and as a leader as well. If you're different, just be different.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
What last question? What if you could go back in time and sit next to the 13-year-old Susanna on the playground, who was awkward and trying to find her place in the world, what would you whisper in her ear as advice?
Well, this just came to me in my meditation when I was at the retreat last week, and it said it's all going to work out. And I would say just trust the process. Enjoy, have fun, love, be open your heart, and do what feels right to you, not what anyone else is saying.
Yeah, I love that.
And listen to your heart.
Is there anything that we haven't spoken about today that you really wanted to touch on?
I was going to say there's so many things, but I feel like we've touched on so much. I mean, look, there's, I guess one area that we haven't really spoken about, and we can always do another episode, is around, the fact that we are the creators of our lives, and how, our beliefs create our reality. And that's more and more work that I'm getting into, which is the science behind manifestation, and why I weave this into career coaching, because, you can have a desire to change jobs, get promoted, or change careers, but if it's not in alignment with you, and you don't really believe in it, and you're putting that energy out there, then you're probably not going to get what you want. You might, but it might not be the exact, desires that you have. You might not get the salary, or you might not be happy, So often people chase the next job because they think that's the right step, and they chase the money. They're not happy. And then the same pattern ensues. So that's why it's so important to get clear in your patterns, so that you don't repeat the same mistakes from the past. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would love to talk to you about that episode 2. Yeah. Hey, Susanna, thank you. I've really, beyond the conversation, I've just really enjoyed reconnecting with you. I think you mentioned the word leadership a little earlier, and I think, not to blow smoke, but I will. I think people like you, I call you walking permission slips. It's like, I don't care what you think of me, society and world, but I'm going in this direction, and anyone that wants to come with me or be a part of this process, I'm going to kind of light the way for everyone. And that's not necessarily a straight path. It can be a very painful path. But the fact that you're so willing to demonstrate the path and show that, hey, there's some pain and uncertainty involved as well, I think is really liberating. So I love what you do. I love how you're doing it. And I'm looking forward to watching the blossoming.
Thank you. Me too. This has been so
Thanks
fun.
for being part of this. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Thanks, Susanna.